Hi, Lee Maxey, CEO of MindMax, and I'm delighted to be here with Tom Cavanagh, Vice Provost for Digital Learning at University of Central Florida, and also a published author, and a very thoughtful and future-oriented and good thinker in our space, and just love to have a conversation together. So,
Yeah, thank you for having me.
yeah, so there's a lot going on right now with AI, with technology. UCF is one of the largest and great scaling institutions. You've designed good, well-designed online learning for a long time, before emergency remote teaching.
Yeah, long before.
I think that makes a difference. I've known about you and the design you've been doing for, I think, over 10 years now. You've been doing a lot there. So can you talk about, how UCF and you think about the importance of design in relationship to online, whether it's for synchronous, asynchronous, blended, hybrid, and so on?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to talk about is ensuring quality, and how do you ensure quality at scale? I think it's a lot easier to bake quality into something that maybe is a little more bespoke, a little more custom, a pilot. Anybody can do a pilot, I think, at a high quality, but how do you translate that into quality at scale? It's one of those things that, like, what got us here may not get us there. Sometimes you have to put in new systems, new processes, new technologies, and it's something that we've spent a lot of time at UCF thinking about. I talk about trying not to outrun your quality supply lines as you scale. You can easily set up a new learning management system shell and just say, go teach it. And that would be easy to do, and it would be terrible. And I think it's a lot of what happened during the pandemic, during emergency remote instruction. It's all of the instructional design and student support services and media production and all of the behind the scenes stuff that leads to that delivery of that particular online course section that makes it good. And that's the stuff that's hard to do at scale. You really have to kind of think about it. When we're doing a pilot, for example, we do a thought exercise that, all right, what if this succeeds? What if we have to take this to scale? Can we do it? Do we have the infrastructure and the support and the capacity and the funding? Because something you can afford for a few students, you may not be able to afford for 70,000, which is what we have.
Right. It's funny because that's a question that we ask in an early phase assessment. Schools are working with us to grow programs, and everyone's all eager to grow. And I'm like, and I ask, well, how much do you want to grow by? And unfortunately, once in a while, I hear the term exponentially, which makes me roll my eyes because whatever.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, that's not a appropriate use of a mathematical term because no one could handle that kind of growth.
Right. Yeah.
But then my next question is, well, what can you handle? I love the outrun your supply lines concept, and we actually see that in the marketing world around social media. Anyone can go on Facebook, anyone can go on LinkedIn, anyone can use social media, but can you continue to maintain organic content, at a level that you need to? So that's related to marketing, but. Your panel was great, and one of the things you talked about was the iron triangle and cost, quality, and access being, an important balance. Can you talk about how you've balanced that? And you mentioned access being, your sort of main, first primary goal, but talk about how that's changed, the fluidity of that, and so forth.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, the iron triangle is this concept that there are three dimensions that are kind of interdependent: quality, cost, and access. And you can't positively impact any one of those without negatively impacting one or more of the others. So for example, if you want to increase quality, you're going to also increase cost and probably reduce access. And we kind of feel like through innovation and digital technologies, you can kind of break that iron triangle and positively impact all three of them at the same time. And what I was saying earlier, you mentioned the panel here at the conference, was that historically online learning has put forward a value proposition related to access. And I think that's still true. But that's not the only thing I think that it does really well now and that you can kind of use it for. When I look at the results that we've had at UCF and others, blended learning has actually higher outcomes than any other modality, even face-to-face. So students do better, they give better evaluations, they withdraw at a lower rate. So that's actually having quality outcomes as opposed to just access outcomes. And I think that through scale, which we just talked about, as we get scale, you can actually also reduce cost. And so these things, I think, is an interesting lens that you can use to look at the work that we do and how to genuinely have impact.
One of the things that was also talked about is policy and the relationship to how that can be difficult or hindering, or it's an environmental condition and it's changing often, but OPMs have had a significant impact to higher ed for the last almost 20 years, and now there's a lot of changes that are in the works.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you see likely to happen with that OPM change?
We'll see how well this ages, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, this is
it's a dynamic environment.
We're in July 2024, so
yeah.
That's what we know now.
Who knows, right?
Right.
But I mean, as I said earlier at the panel, I do feel like online learning is overregulated, and I think it's because there's some mistrust. Maybe it's a bit of a hangover from the pandemic and emergency remote instruction, which wasn't the best experience for everybody, especially in K through 12, who I think had real challenges, digital divide challenges and access and other kinds of stuff. But that overregulated environment puts a real burden on institutions to try to comply, when I think most of us are just trying to do the right thing. And then we have to put this whole compliance infrastructure in place to try to satisfy all of these mandates. And what's going to happen with the OPMs, that's sort of mixed up in all of this new regulation and negotiated rulemaking and all the stuff that's going on right now. If I had to guess, I think what will probably happen is that the bundled services exception will probably go away, and we may end up moving away from a rev share kind of a business model to more of a fee-for-service model. I don't think OPMs are going to go away, but I think maybe the business model will evolve from rev share to fee-for-service.
I would agree, and I think we've talked about unbundling the OPM services because schools don't necessarily need all of those aspects.
Yeah.
They need some, or they need a large portion of them. So, as you see AI having a greater role in our lives in general, can you talk about where you see AI as an enabler, for whether it's tutoring, whether it's enrollment, but where do you see AI with higher ed being a strong enabler?
Well, I think that AI is probably going to be applied in almost every aspect of higher ed and our lives. Buckle up, right?
Yeah.
Because it's coming. Obviously, in instruction, UCF has a big teaching and learning with AI conference that has gotten enormous response. So there's interest in this. Like, how can you leverage these tools to more effectively teach and teach students how to use it? So, because they're going to go into the workforce and be expected to know how to use it, or else they're going to be, as they say, replaced by somebody who does know how to use it. Within maybe the world of online learning, I think there's a lot of potential for using AI for course development, for helping faculty to build courses more effectively, more efficiently. I'll tell you just a very granular example is that faculty typically they hate writing questions for exams. And especially if you're doing an adaptive learning program or something, you have to write a lot of questions, have a big pool, because you can have so many iterations of that. And it's laborious to write all of these questions. AI can really simplify that for you.
That's great.
So obviously faculty will have the ultimate say on what is an appropriate question or not, but AI can draft a whole bunch of them for them. And that's just a really minor example,
Right.
Let alone doing sort of a deep analysis on data coming out of the learning management system, making recommendations for interventions so we can proactively help students be successful. There's just so much potential. Coaching, you mentioned tutoring. I think all of those things are available. I personally like the idea, sort of inspired by Georgia Tech's Jill Watson experiment. Could we have an online, always 24/7 available teaching assistant who knows the course content
Right.
that you can access that's scalable across 1,000
Right.
students in a section. I think we're not that far from that.
Not just knows the content, but also knows the individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and knows what they've done to date and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of knowing that's possible there.
Let's buckle up, right? Yeah.
I had a very interesting experience in the late 90s at UCF. I went to a think tank, and at that time I was working in the corporate learning space for an LMS. But we brought in military, at the time, video game designers and game people, academics, and we sat and talked about what was the future of online. And I'll never forget the game. There was multiple gaming people, but one of the gaming people finally stood up and said, "You guys are all discounting the things that I'm saying. There are more people coming and using our games than using all of the things that you're talking about."
Yeah.
And our average age of a gamer is 35 years old, and they spend this number of hours a week. If you could get that on one of your courses, you would love it.
Yeah.
I still believe there's really an unmet opportunity in relationship to how we're designing pedagogically from this linear, I've got an objective and I'm going to go map this out and I'm going to directly try and address this objective versus, this concomitant indirect approach of having a fun experience. Gamification is a term that's, I think, overused, but just having a fun experience where I really enjoy myself and I learned. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about what you see there?
I totally agree. There's a great book called "What Video Games Have to Teach Me About Learning and Literacy" that I highly recommend because it gets to some of these concepts. And I couldn't agree more. I think the barrier so far has been building a game is expensive and it's time consuming. But I think we're getting there. And maybe with AI, we'll be able to more efficiently and more cost effectively be able to build some of these learning experiences that simulate or emulate what a gaming experience is like. Because there's so many things that happen in a video game that you learn. And you could easily be taught in that way and make it fun. I mean, ASU is doing some really interesting experiments now with virtual labs that are kind of a gaming challenge experience, and you'll learn all about biology along the way. But that's expensive, and they're working with like Hollywood producers for that.
Yep.
But that's the vanguard. Soon that will become much more accessible to the rest of us. And I do agree, that's the future. We still have great relationships with these people. Electronic Arts is in downtown Orlando, and the people who run our Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy came from Electronic Arts. And so, I think that there's an opportunity for us to work more closely with people in that curriculum to actually build our own stuff.
Yeah. I think there's tremendous opportunity there. Diamond Age is a book that was written by Neil Stevenson that talks about a concept of a game. It was written in the 90s, but we used to build interactive video discs in the 80s for literacy for adults. And it was one of those things that adult literacy has a lot of shame attached to it. And this was a private experience where no one else could see what was going on. And it made people feeling a lot more comfortable about exploring failing with a very low consequence and learning. So as I mentioned, as you have a wide range of interests. I think of the book To Serve with Love, where the all work and no play concept. You're an author, so talk about how that's benefited you. This wonderful passion you have for writing and continuing to publish, and that's fantastic. Just talk. You're a pretty interesting guy in the relationship. You've got a lot going on. So
Thank you. Yeah.
How does that all help you and so forth?
Well, I think having a creative outlet is important for everybody, and so for me, it's writing mystery novels, crime novels, and thomasbcavanagh.com. Check it out if you like private eye novels. But for some people, it's knitting, and for some people, it's singing or playing in a band or doing marathons or whatever it is. Having some outlet, I think, makes you a better person for your job, right? And so having that creative outlet for me has been really important to kind of scratch that itch. But I think it also, it helps you think, and thinking helps in my day job, right?
Right.
So all of those things I think are part of what we bring to any employment that we have.
Anything more you want to add in terms of your view of where things are heading from a higher ed
Yeah, I
standpoint?
think it's funny that it feels like a lot has changed in the last 10 years or so. I think it's in the next 5 years we'll have at least as much change as we've had in the last 10 years. So, stay up to date, talk to people, read the trades, and just, hang on tight.
Well, thank you very much to Tom Cavanagh. I really appreciate your time. So
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
thank
That was
you. I
fun.
appreciate
Thanks.
it.